Hi, I'm Belinda, the Director of the Institute of Personal Care Science, and I get asked a lot and I see a lot of misinformation on the internet about the potential of lead and heavy metals being in our cosmetics and makeup in particular. Well, today I'm here to tell you that it is banned. Lead and heavy metals are banned in cosmetic products despite what you read on the internet. And rather than just tell you about it, I'm actually going to show you the regulatory limits that are in place, and I'm also going to show you how the different regulators around the world also prohibit lead and heavy metal in cosmetics, regardless if it's from natural contaminants or not. I'm also going to show you the purity criteria that's in place and also show you how the regulators enforce recalls when they find contamination in products. They consider lead and heavy metals in cosmetics when they exceed limits to be contaminants or adulterated products, and they must, under the law, be removed from the market straight away. What does this mean for you? It means you can use your cosmetics with confidence despite what you read on the internet, because lead and heavy metals are banned and, if found in cosmetics, are recalled from the marketplace immediately because they're simply not allowed to be there. Now, I know you're not just going to believe me because there's so much misinformation out there, so I'm going to work through the major countries and their regulations, but of course even the minor countries have the same regulatory limits in place to ensure safety for their consumers. I'm also working through this list in alphabetical order. I'll be talking about Australia, Canada, EU and the US regulations in particular. Let's start with Australia. Now, as you can see here, I have on the screen, and it clearly shows you that lead is prohibited in hair products and it's restricted in all other cosmetic products to 100 milligrams per kilogram or less. But there is an overarching principle in Australia from the Australian Consumer Competition Commission, or ACCC, which shows that companies should not be making false or misleading claims about the presence of lead or any other sort of safety issues about otherwise perfectly safe and suitable cosmetic products. You can see this screen here where it tells you that misleading and deceptive conduct is not acceptable under the Australian law. Further to that, you can see that companies putting products onto the market are also regulated under the ACCC to ensure that their products are safe for sale. This means companies are not permitted to use lead or heavy metals in their products, even though it exists under the SUSMP law that they're prohibited or restricted. They're also prohibited under the ACCC law because then they would make the products unsafe. Now let's visit Canada's regulations. In Canada, they have the ingredient hot list. They have a list of ingredients that are prohibited for use in cosmetic products, and they have a list of ingredients that are restricted for use in cosmetic products. Now, we can search this prohibited list really easily. If I type in lead, you will see that lead acetate and lead and its compounds is prohibited. Let's type in cadmium, also prohibited. Now let's search for mercury. Also prohibited. So under Canadian law, these heavy metals and all the other heavy metals are easy to search, and you can see they're prohibited in cosmetic products. Let's go to Europe. Now, in their Annex 2, they have a list of substances that are prohibited in cosmetic products. If I search this reference document, you can see under Entry 43 that arsenic is prohibited. Entry 68 that cadmium is prohibited. Entry 97 that chromium is prohibited. Entry 289 that lead and its compounds are prohibited. Entry 221, mercury is prohibited, and you can continue searching to find cobalt and nickel as well. Now you might be saying, but Belinda, lead's naturally occurring, so aren't there traces of it, especially in some colorants? Yes, you'd be correct, but we have a really handy purity guide and standards to adhere to make sure that the lead and heavy metals in these colorants never exceeds safe limits. Let's take a look at that document now. Now, one of the great things about the purity criteria set out by the EU is it has some great assay information, and it also clearly lists out the impurities and restrictions to ensure the safe use of those colour components. And because it exists in EU law, it can be used as a reference standard for other countries as well. but US has its own special set of standards, and we'll look at those next. But first, let me just clarify for you what this purity criteria means. It means even if I was to obtain this colorant as a manufacturer and a brand putting a product onto the market containing this colorant, they are legally required to make sure that that colorant adheres to this purity criteria. If it exceeds these limits, that ingredient is not permitted to be used. In other words, where the ingredient is compliant, it will comply with these purity criteria, which as a cumulative total will still be below safe limits of any of these materials. And in any case, you're likely to be eating more lead and heavy metals in your food every day, and I'll look at that list at the end of this video. In other words, where your cosmetics comply with purity criteria, you won't be absorbing anywhere near a dangerous level of lead or heavy metals from your cosmetics and makeup. And you say, what about those adulterated or contaminated products? Well, they're against the law, and if found, they'll be recalled immediately. What this means is you can use your cosmetics and makeup with confidence, knowing that products that comply with the regulations will be safe and will not contain adverse inputs of lead or heavy metals. And if they are adulterated or contaminated in any way, they are removed from the market immediately. It is that company's responsibility putting those products onto the market to make sure that they comply with these limits. And the limits exist for every colour that is permitted for use in cosmetics. Now, let's take a look at what the FDA has to say about lead and heavy metals in cosmetics. You can see here that the FDA clearly states that where a cosmetic does not comply with the regulations, it's considered adulterated or misbranded, and it's against the law to sell those types of products. Specifically, a product is considered adulterated if it contains a colour additive other than those which comply with their strict regulations. In this document, you can see that each colour additive that the FDA approves is listed in a regulation. And that regulation describes the colour additive, tells how it is permitted to be used, and provides limits on impurities. Lead, as an example, is typically restricted to 10 to 20 parts per million. I will go through what this limit means and how it was determined to be safe later in this video, as well as show you how you're likely to be ingesting far more than that every day from your fruits and vegetables, even if you're eating conventional or organic fruits and vegetables, and I have journal reports to show this as well. You'll also see they have a prohibition on the use of coal because of its lead content. This means if you see a coal item in the US, it's against the law. Report it and it will be recalled off the market instantly because it does not comply with the regulations. Now, unfortunately, I see references from websites selling lipsticks saying that the FDA has tested 400 lipsticks and that they all contained lead. Remember that there is that very strict limit in place. And in fact, they found that over 99% of those 400 lipsticks contain less than 10 parts per million, which is a deemed safe, suitable input. Again, it's less than you'd be eating from your fruits and vegetables. Let's take a look at that list, and you'll see here how they all ranked under 10 parts per million. You can see that many of those lipsticks tested had a very small input, less than 2 parts per million of lead present. Just keep that number in mind. I'm going to show you some calculations later using an average of 3 parts per million just to be on the safe side. Now, in case you need further convincing, I want to point you to this particular FDA document that asks, are these products legal in the United States? And you can see that the FDA has clearly said, no, they're not legal. Regardless of what you say, these products will be removed from the market if they exceed that 10 part per million limit. Now, in case you're wondering how they conduct these tests and how they determined these limits were safe for use, you can read this document from the FDA as well. We have all of these links available for you so you can conduct further research yourself. They explained how they conducted the surveys, and they also explained how they determined that these were safe inputs. You can also see that the limits for other heavy metals are also similarly low, determined in a similar manner. One of the ways they determined these limits was below the level of detection. In other words, when the limits get to a certain point, they can't detect them anymore. So if they're testing at those parts per million inputs and they can't detect it at all, they'll declare it to be compliant. They've also looked at how much lipstick could possibly be ingested, as well as how much lead or heavy metal could be absorbed through the use of eyeshadows or other topically applied cosmetic products to determine how much could be ingested or absorbed through the skin compared to the amount that would be absorbed when it's ingested through your food. So now, let's take a look at the content that you would be ingesting in your foods. And I've been talking about some journal documents. These are also available for you to access so you can read the full sources yourself. As you can see in this table here, they show the average intake from conventional and organic fruits and vegetables from a variety of sources. Now what you can see here is measurements made in microgram per gram to the power of -1. In other words, if we move that decimal place to the left, we would then see that the average presence would be about 0.4 parts per million. We're going to use 0.3 parts per million just to make the maths a little easier, and also so that I can show you some calculations for the skeptics watching this video, that I'm taking the worst case scenario for lipstick and the best case scenario for your fruits and vegetables. And just in case you're not sure if that study's robust enough, here is another study where they show the lead and heavy metal inputs in other sources of fruits and vegetables as well. Now again, for my calculations, I'm going to be using 0.3 parts per million as my reference point for the fruits and vegetables. And you can see from both of these journal documents that that's quite a realistic input to use. Now you might be saying, well Belinda, they found 3 parts per million in lipsticks and they found 0.3 parts per million in fruits and vegetables. Doesn't that mean we're getting 10 times as much from our lipstick? No, because you're eating a lot more fruits and vegetables every day than you could possibly consume of lipstick, or even cumulative total from all of your makeup sources. The health recommendations are to eat 2 to 3 serves of fruits or vegetables per day. If we said 1 serving of fruit or vegetables was 80 grams, and if we average this out, because not necessarily everyone's going to get their 2 to 3 servings of fruit or vegetables a day, if we then said you were having around 200 grams combined total of fruits and vegetables per day at 0.3 parts per million lead, you would be consuming 0.6 micrograms per day of lead from your typical fruit and vegetable sources, regardless of whether they're conventionally or organically grown. By comparison, you can't possibly eat that much lipstick in a day. For example, a typical lipstick tube is 4 grams. Women who use lipstick regularly would agree that they would use a 4-gram lipstick tube over around 2 months. This means that at worst, they would be ingesting about 0.06 grams of lipstick per day. So now, even if you were ingesting 0.06 grams per day of lipstick, if we multiply this out by 3 parts per million, you would be consuming approximately 0.0018 micrograms of lead per day. This is 333 times less than the amount of lead that you would be consuming through your regular intake of fruit and vegetables. But then you might say, hang on Belinda, what about our cumulative totals of using foundation in a liquid form plus a powder? What about eyeshadows, eyeliners, mascaras, lipsticks, or any other type of makeup we might use? Even if we used a cumulative total of 2 grams of makeup per day, and women would agree that is a fairly consistent amount that you might use, when you multiply that out again by a 3 parts per million average, this would result in a cumulative total of 0.06 grams per day from all sources applied on your lips and your skin. This is 10 times less than the likely intake of lead from your fruits and vegetables. Not to mention that those fruits and vegetables are ingested, and therefore the absorption of the lead through the intestinal lining is much higher than could ever be absorbed through the skin or even ingested from application to the lips. In other words, you're getting at least 10 times, possibly 333 times or more lead from your daily consumption of fruits and vegetables, whether they're grown organically or conventionally, than you could ever get from your lipstick or your makeup. Unfortunately, with the amount of misinformation that is on the internet and the way it is reported, I know you're not likely to believe me. But I have a great Dropbox folder full of the regulatory sources that I have presented you today, as well as these journal reports showing the lead and heavy metal content of various fruits and vegetables. Next time you see misinformation on the internet suggesting that lead or heavy metals is regularly present in makeup and not regulated, please refer to these sources because I'm providing them for you. I hope this video shows you that the use of lead and heavy metals in lipstick and makeup is very well regulated and in fact prohibited to ensure consumer safety. Please contact us for these resources rather than just believing the misinformation that's on the internet. We're happy to share them with you. We're not trying to sell you product, so we're not trying to mislead you into believing us over them. I'm simply providing you these resources so that they exist on the internet to give a balanced argument and help you feel safe about using your lipstick and makeup regularly. Please give the video a thumbs up, please leave any questions or comments below, and make sure you subscribe to receive notifications about all our videos. Happy formulating!